Astrologer, and I am so excited right now because I have somebody here to chat with that is absolutely amazing. I have learned so much from. And he's going to come on and talk about some really cool stuff. And so I am introducing Steven Forrest, world-renowned evolutionary astrologer. Hi, Steven.
Hey, Krista, how you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great. So this is just so exciting to me because I've been following your work for a couple of years now, and I'm just so amazed at what you do. You're kind of like the pioneer for all of us that, we can even begin to dive into the depth of astrology. So tell us about what you do, Steven. I want to make sure that I get it right.
Okay. Well, the name of what I do is evolutionary astrology, and well, it's a big subject. The first line of my first book, The Inner Sky, which came out back in 1984, was "People change," period. People change. And then the second line was, "And one assumption runs like a virus through most astrological literature, and that is that people do not change." And that's really the heart of it, that we're evolving beings, and yet we open a typical astrology book, and at the lowest level, we learn all the Virgos are picky, and you can always recognize a Gemini because they have their mouth open, and the Sagittariuses know everything, and Piscean people, such as a close personal friend of mine, tend to be spaced out all the time, and Scorpios are sexy but treacherous, and you know the stuff, and it makes us smile, and it might even have a minor bit of truth in it at times, but it just almost makes me want to, I laugh, I guess, more than cry, but to think how sacred and beautiful and deep astrology really is when we recognize that it's about choices and a path to change, and how sad it is when we trivialize it and trivialize human beings by reducing them to embarrassing descriptions of their personalities. So we are evolving, and I call it evolutionary astrology.
Wow. Well, that is so true, and that's kind of one of the things that I've been, asking myself as I dive in to the different signs is, they talk about, like you said, the Pisces being spaced out and always escaping, and then I think, but you know what? The greatest creative work that I've done, being a Pisces ascendant and having a moon in Pisces, is in my times of escape. How can I embrace who I am and not beat myself up for that side of me, because it's obviously necessary, and there's a way to possibly utilize that if we can know more about it.
Yes, amen. And so we can describe working with Pisces energy for a while, because I know you're very familiar with it. So there would be astrologers who would see a lot of Pisces in somebody's chart and say, for example, you're a drunk. You drink all the time, because all the Piscean people are drunkards, which is not true at all, but we would hear that said. And then we might hear another set of astrologers who would say, oh, you're a great saint, all this Pisces, you have a special relationship with God, and you're this mystic. And well, then we find a lot of drunken Pisces types, and we find a lot of mystical Pisces types. And so both of these sets of statements are true, but where the magic enters is that if we simply connect the dots and recognize that it's possible for somebody with escapist issues or spacey kinds of issues to work with those energies and transform them and turn themselves into something closer to a mystic. So there is an evolutionary path. It's not like you roll the dice and find out what kind of Pisces person you're going to be, but you can take responsibility for your own evolution, and you can work with the energies and align them with the will of God, with Dharma, with the big plan, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, no, that is so amazing. I know that when I had my reading with you, these are not readings, this is not astrology in the back of a magazine. This is like, I sat there for 2 hours at the edge of my seat while you unfolded my story and how healing that was for me, how healing astrology has been for me. Do you find that with your clients, and that it's an open door to really to understand ourselves, what we've always known but didn't give ourselves permission to be?
Beautifully said, beautifully said. And yes, absolutely. We can help people by, like I was saying a few moments ago, these alchemical transformations of the negative responses to a sign into the more positive ones. But then closer to what you were just saying, we might find, for example, again sticking with the Piscean imagery, that a person carrying that energy, which is imaginative and visionary and psychic and free associative, but they are living in a world today that tends to not value those qualities, that would value your ability to do mathematics or program a computer or something like this. So the Piscean people are given the message that there is something wrong with them, and they better struggle and struggle and struggle to try to become Virgos, for example, which is a really poisonous message to give a Pisces. And so
Yes.
by affirming the great strengths that are present in each chart and kind of honoring them in the person, we can help somebody just have more confidence in that incalculably precious gift of dignity and self-love.
Yeah, no, that is so amazing, because that's been, and I know for a lot of people, the struggle coming out of very traditional values, where a lot of using the Pisces energy, a lot of our gifting, a lot of our experiences were not allowed, or we were told that it couldn't be true, it couldn't be right.
Yes.
And I've noticed since, this transition we've been in with Neptune moving into Pisces, it just feels like the doors are beginning to open up. I mean, I see it everywhere, but freeing us up to possibly being able to be who we are, all of the water signs, finally being able to come out and, tap into these things that we haven't been able to talk about.
Yeah, exactly. The world is changing before our eyes. Neptune and Pisces, some of your listeners, are not conversant with the technicalities of astrology, so just frame it a little bit. Neptune, the mystic, the planet with a natural connection with Pisces, takes 165 years to get around the sun, or through the 12 signs of the zodiac. When it's in Pisces, it's very strong for everybody. It's stronger there than anywhere else. But, the last time it entered Pisces was 165 years ago. So there's nobody walking around who actually remembers it. But every time Neptune goes into Pisces, there is a kind of spiritual awakening on the planet. It's not necessarily an age of peace, love, and understanding. We haven't had one of those yet, as near as I can tell. But an awakening, an interest. People simply become more drawn to the idea of the meaning of things. One of my favorite illustrations, and I'm getting old, but this goes back way before me. This goes back to 45 AD, long time ago, when a Jewish gentleman by the name of Saul had become Paul, and he, in about 45 AD, as near as we can reconstruct it, went to Asia, as they call it in the Bible. Actually, Turkey would be a more precise way of saying it. He went there and tried to bring the Christian gospel, and basically got his butt kicked. He was lucky to get out of there alive. And then 47 AD, Neptune entered Pisces, and suddenly the Christian message, took hold, because people were ready to hear it. They were hungry for something that was meaningful. And I think of the fire and the rightness and the enthusiasm and the magic of the first century of after Christ's work, before, in my view, some rather crazy theologians began to distort the message so terribly, and instead of experiencing it. But that magic, it's like it wasn't just St. Paul that did it, and at the risk of sounding blasphemous, I wouldn't even say it was just Jesus who did it. The human race had to be ready, and hungry, and we were then. And so Neptune in Pisces is the story of the New Testament. Isn't that?
Wow.
Yeah, and there are many other stories I could tell involving other religions. I don't want to be tedious here, but one of the most dramatic examples, the great explosion of Islam, the Muslim religion in the early 8th century. Neptune entered Pisces, and it stayed in that sign for about 15 years. And in that period, Islam spread from the Pyrenees in Spain all the way across North Africa, the Middle East, and on really to Indonesia. In 15 years, it's completely amazing because people were tired of the old empty religion, just like the Romans were tired of their old empty religion. Were hungry. The Christian faith went into a kind of negative condition for a while in the medieval period, and then we're hungry for something real. Along comes the Protestant Reformation, Martin Luther, Neptune and Pisces again, because the people were ready. Buddhism came to China, Neptune and Pisces. It waited 2 cycles over 3.5 centuries before it crossed the water to Japan. The Japanese people were ready, but Neptune had to be in Pisces. It opens the gateway. And here we are again, 2011 through 2026. If you're Piscean and mystical, it's an interesting time to be alive, Chrystal.
Oh, my whole entire life has changed, and I can say for sure. And I feel so privileged. Like, this is such an amazing privilege that in our history, that in our time right now, that we get to be a part of this.
Yes.
What do you feel like there's a special underlining message with this Neptune and Pisces? Obviously there's been a message each time that's evolved. What's the message now for us?
Well, this is sometimes when I speak of astrology, I feel very confident, maybe too confident. And in answering your question here, I want to say that this is very much just Steve talking. This is my best guess. I guess it always is, but right now I'm a little bit more aware of that. And I think that what has changed is, let me build this on a simple, concrete idea, the internet. And because of the internet, because of like Facebook is like the 2nd or 3rd largest country in the world in terms of population, or something like that. I forget the exact number. I have friends personally in Turkey. I have friends in Japan and in China, and sometimes I know what they had for breakfast this morning because we've just emailed to each other, Facebook message to each other. So where I take that is that the world is not nearly as big as it used to be. There's much more of a sense of one planet. The sense of national identity is getting a lot more blurred than it used to. The feeling that, like, I travel to China a lot to teach, and the first time I went, it felt like going to another planet. But now they're my friends. I'm concerned about them. I know the dramas of their life. My life is kind of privileged that way. I do get to travel more than most people, but we all have the world in our living room now. And so where I'm aiming this is that it's a question that I think humanity will wrestle with between now and 2026. And it's a sacred question. What would a world religion look like? What would a religion look like that did not exaggerate our differences with other humans, but instead celebrated our common spirituality? I think that's the cutting edge. And I'd like to add one more thing, and it is that if I'm right about what's going on here, I know it would bother people, because the cutting edge of history, the changing of the paradigm, always triggers cautious reactions, conservative reactions. I don't mean politically conservative, but people who are scared of change. And so if I'm right, what I would say would be bothersome to some people, as I suspect it was.
Well, yeah, because I think it's letting go of the age of a certain amount of judgment, and even through our religious views. And I shared with you, I grew up in the church and I hold dear certain messages, but there's a judgment, there's a condemnation that's always looming. And I think as we move into this new age, I don't know if it's because it's heading into the age of Aquarius, it feels so Aquarian to me, that we are looking at each other's souls now.
Yeah.
As when I see people, I mean, I have, like you're saying, amazing friends I've never met. Some of them I've never even seen their picture, and yet I've connected with their souls, and it's a beautiful thing, and there is no judgment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think it's that feels like the energy, but of course, people want to feel like they're the only ones, and so that keeps that judgment going, and I think everybody has a chance, a voice in this.
The need to be right. People have such a hunger to be right. And usually somebody like that, they're right by making somebody else wrong.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're talking about the emergence of a spirituality of unity between people rather than division between people. If humanity is going to survive, that's the religion we need.
Mm-hmm.
Ran into a quote that I'd love to share here. I read it in a murder mystery by a guy named Jonathan Kellerman, and it was the most succinct statement. He said, "Religion makes good people better and bad people worse." Isn't that beautiful?
Yes. Yes.
The whole
that is so amazing, and there almost becomes a spirit of confinement, and I think with this whole Pluto and Capricorn thing that we're going through, all of these radical changes, these systems aren't holding up anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
They're not working, even for people that have clung to them. They know something's not working, and here in my mind, of course, I'm very Piscean, I see this beautiful, ocean, currents coming through and washing us clean, It's amazing how they work together, and that's what I think is so fascinating about evolutionary astrology, which is what you bring to us, is being able to look at how this is, played out over history.
Yeah, that's fascinating, isn't it?
Yes.
Most of my work is really focused on individuals, though I should say I think about the big, broad world picture and what it means when Pluto in Capricorn or Neptune in Pisces. I have fun with that. I even lecture about it some, but I'm really most engaged with the individual journey. I believe so powerfully in human freedom, and I think that operates at the level of nations, but it operates much more vividly at the level of individuals. When somebody decides to take responsibility for themselves and change, they can do, well, like extraordinary transformations in a period of 2 or 3 years. I think with nations, there's a sense that since they're collectives, they're kind of held back somewhat by the mass mind, by the least common denominator always has a big vote, rather obviously. And so I like to work with nations, but I'm really much more excited about individuals because they're potentially so elastic and magical.
Well, I think one thing that's so fascinating to me is I've had a lot of emails through my audience of this younger generation coming up.
Yeah.
And I am telling you, they are so intelligent and they are so tuned into themselves. I was never that connected and tuned in at their age. And it's like this 18 to 25-year-old little group in there. They understand astrology. Mm-hmm. They are self-seeking. They are looking at this stuff, and it's just going crazy. I mean, it's amazing. And I think it's going to be, good for people to already get a start in their youth to begin this journey.
Back centered in 1993, there was a conjunction of Uranus and Neptune in Capricorn. And it's a real big deal. It's a 171-year cycle, between the successive conjunctions. Neptune, as I mentioned, 165 years to get around, and Uranus, 84 years to get around. So it takes a while for them to catch up with each other. And it's so interesting. You mentioned that 18 to 25-year-old age group. because pretty much right in the center of that, we have this Uranus-Neptune conjunction. And when the two planets are close together, it counts. And so you've essentially named the whole cohort, not generation, but kind of cohort of young people who carry this energy in them. Now, the Uranus is revolution in a single word. And Neptune has to do, one of my favorite images is our dream of the world, the way we imagine the world to be. So a revolution in the way we image the world, we dream of the world. Let me put this on the map for you a bit. The last time this happened, in the early 1820s, and we get the first telegraph message, the first steamship to cross the Atlantic, the whole kind of fossil fuel driven culture began to emerge. One of my favorite thoughts, an English gentleman, last name Faraday, took his friends down into his laboratory in his cellar and showed them a trick. He was able to take a magnet and spin it inside a coil of copper wire, and sparks came out the end. And you can imagine these English gentlemen sipping their port, thinking, well, that's droll, Mr. Faraday. What a cute trick. The guy invented how to generate electricity with the Uranus-Neptune conjunction happening. The paradigm shifted. Here's one more image. In that same time, and this will sound strange, but one of humanity's sacred books was written, Frankenstein.
Oh my gosh.
Frankenstein. And think about it. Science creates a monster whose effects it cannot foresee or control. That's the Frankenstein story. And as fossil fuel is released, as electricity is released, the whole cycle of culture that we went through that created what we call the modern world, the airplanes, the trip to the moon, it's all based on that. But then in the early 1990s, it happened again. And we're still, I'm tempted to say, too close to it still to know exactly what it meant. Although one thing we know for sure that it meant was the internet. Mm-hmm. We can trace that back to the 60s, but the real explosion of it, suddenly America Online is so big. And it's got to be way, way bigger than that. And these kids, I guess I should still call them kids, I'm 65, that are averaging like 20-ish now, the 18 to 25 group. These are so interesting because they carry this paradigm inside of them. They're the ones who are so different from anyone who has gone before because they're carrying this new vision. And when I teach this, one of my lines that kind of bothers some of the old people, I say, trust the children. Trust the children. They know something we don't know. They're carrying the seeds of the whole next cycle of our culture. They're dreaming the world in a revolutionary new way.
I'm so glad that you shared that because, I have a son who's 25, I have a daughter who's 17, Perfect. And I'm seeing already, that they just have this amazing ability to tap in to the trends, to the airwaves, to the undercurrent. There's just this connection. And then I'm fortunate enough to have a little guy, 3.5, but born in this Neptune and Piscean, time, and he's like an old soul. They're just so different. So I love being able to observe this. Yeah. But you're right. We're so close to it. It's so fascinating to see how it's going to unfold. But they are different, and they are connected.
They really are. It's interesting. It's like using sort of Christian imagery where, John the Baptist came first, and prepared the way for Jesus. And it's almost according to the same structure. We would see this group of people with the Uranus-Neptune conjunction, the 18 to 25-ish range now, coming just in advance of the whole generation of kids, most of them not even born yet, with Neptune and Pisces. They're witnessing the birth of children among whom will be some of the great souls of human history. carrying this Neptunian Piscean energy inside them? Is there another Buddha on the earth, another Jesus figure on the earth, another Zoroaster? I suspect the answer is yes, and yet, right now their wisdom is goo goo blah blah, and feed me, because they're just babies at this point, and it's so exciting to think that this condition will continue until 2025 and 26. Many of them aren't even a gleam in their papa and mama's eye yet, but they're coming, and they have wisdom, and we need it.
Yeah, and I just to make a note, because I come from the Pluto and Uranus and Virgo generation, and those of us that are parents, we still tend to look at everything with trying to dissect it and trying to give it a title and give it a label. And working with horses, I've been able to work with a lot of kids that they give them the title of autism and all of those things, and it's because we don't understand how intuitively connected they are, and I wish that we could, find a way to bring those worlds together without the labels, because I think these kids are just amazing. We've got to find a way to bring out who they are, the best in them, and not keep stuffing them in our Verdonian boxes.
Oh, yeah, yes. Something that, I can really rant about this, and it's the way, so the consciousness of these young people is so extraordinarily different. And here I'm referring both to the Uranus and Neptune conjunction generation and this Neptune and Pisces generation. They're different, but their consciousness works in ways that are unprecedented in human history. And so where I can easily get into a rant is how many of them are being diagnosed as having some kind of psychiatric disorder. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of like diagnosing Jesus as psychotic because he believes he's on a mission from God. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's like, maybe the kids are right, maybe they are not in diagnosable conditions, but in fact are experiencing a very different style of consciousness, which for one thing moves more quickly, intuitively, and integratively than ours. So we will see that phenomenon occurring, and there's a danger of diagnosing it as an attention deficit disorder, for example. They got something quickly and they moved on, or they free associated in a way that would ultimately be fruitful and creative, but because they didn't stay on the linear page, we imagine that they have some kind of psychiatric disorder. We've got to be really careful of that and honor the pleasure that they're bringing.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, and that's what's been exciting to me about, I've been working with some other mothers that we, are able to look at our kids' charts and talk about it just generally and give each other ideas, my little Capricorn, he loves to build, and he loves to do certain things. So instead of going, what's wrong with him, and let's get him down to some medication, it's like, let's see what I can help him build, because that's how he needs to express himself.
Yeah,
and that's what I love about astrology and bringing it through our generation, that people can use it as a tool.
Yeah.
So.
That's really the right use of it, Sometimes I like the metaphor of thinking of astrology as a weather report, and it's like, so you'll learn that there's a 50% chance of rain today, which we could sorely use here in California now, but 50% chance of rain, and so do you bring an umbrella or not? It's your call. But it sure is good to be informed that there's a 50% chance of rain, and now do as you will. It's your life. The planets don't control us, but they can kind of guide us and suggest and warn. That's their beauty.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this was absolutely fascinating, Steven. I want to thank you so much for taking the time and coming on my channel. I'm going to be putting Steven's links below, so you can check out his website. He's got amazing books. You've got a lot of great webinars and downloads and classes going on. So I thank you for, giving those of us up and coming astrologers the you know, your tools, your lessons, and teaching us. I'm so grateful for that.
You're very welcome. It's been a pleasure, Krista.
Okay, well, thank you. And everybody, if you have any comments, you can leave a comment below. And thank you again, Steven Forrest, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye.